Okay, so let's be clear right up front. We are not here today to solve a 2,700-year-old religious debate. Nope. What we are going to do is look at how an AI was challenged to try. And honestly, the fascinating part isn't the final answer it came up with, it's the incredibly careful, step-by-step method it used to get there. This is all about the process, not a prophecy.
So, here's the big question, right? Can you take an AI, lock it in a kind of digital room with nothing but a few specific documents, and see if it can reason its way through a super complex problem? We're talking no internet access, no Googling, no preloaded biases, just a pure, raw test of its ability to analyze only the sources it's given.
And the challenge, well, it revolves around one of the big ones, Isaiah 53. You might know it as the suffering servant prophecy. For literally thousands of years, this has been one of the most hotly debated passages in the Hebrew Bible. So yeah, that makes it the perfect high-stakes test case for our AI, don't you think?
Now, at the heart of this whole debate, you've got two completely different interpretations. On one hand, the Christian view sees the servant as one individual, Jesus, acting as a sacrifice. But on the other hand, the traditional Jewish interpretation, heavily influenced by commentators like Rashi, sees the servant as a collective, the entire nation of Israel, suffering throughout history. The AI's only job was to look at these two ideas using only the evidence it was handed.
So what exactly was in this digital room with the AI? What tools did it have? Its entire world was boiled down to just three things. First, a few different translations of the text itself. Second, a really detailed historical timeline focusing on Jewish persecution. And third, its own prior analyses from this very conversation so it could, learn and build on its own work. And that's it. Seriously, no outside help whatsoever.
Okay, so how does an AI even start something like this? Well, it begins with phase one, data extraction. Before it can do any fancy analysis, it first has to do the hard work of breaking everything down. It has to turn all this messy, raw text into a clean, structured database that it can actually understand and work with.
The best way to picture it is like the AI is being a super meticulous librarian. It goes through and systematically tags every single piece of information. Key Hebrew words and how they were translated differently? Tagged. The main arguments of each theological side? Tagged. Every historical event, from a massacre to an expulsion? Tagged. Every single fact got sorted, labeled, and put on exactly the right digital shelf.
All right, so with all that data neatly organized, the AI is ready for phase two, comparative analysis. This is where it starts to put things side by side, directly comparing the texts to pinpoint exactly where, and more importantly, why, these two interpretations split apart.
And right away, you see how one single word can change, well, everything. In the King James Version, which is foundational for the Christian view, it says the servant will sprinkle many nations. But if you look at the Jewish Judaica Press translation, it says he will cast down many nations. Think about that. Sprinkle versus cast down. Purification versus vindication. That is a huge, huge difference, and it all comes down to one little word.
Let's dig into that for a second. The original Hebrew word is yazeh, and what the AI pointed out is that the choice of how to translate this word is absolutely not random. It's tied directly to the theology of each side. Sprinkle fits perfectly with concepts of purification and baptism. Cast down, on the other hand, lines up with the idea of being vindicated and triumphing over your oppressors. So what you're seeing is that the translation itself is already nudging you toward a certain interpretation.
And it wasn't just a one-off. The AI's analysis started to pick up on a broader pattern. Take another Hebrew word, lamo, which means to them. The AI noted that the Judaica Press translation consistently stuck to plural forms when translating this. Now, that might seem like a small detail, but that linguistic choice directly backs up the idea of the servant being a collective group, right? To them, not to him. It's a subtle but really powerful piece of the puzzle.
Okay, now we get to what I think is the most powerful part of this whole process. Phase 3, thematic synthesis. This is the moment where the AI takes all those linguistic details it found and tries to connect them to the cold, hard facts from that historical timeline it was given.
And to really get what's happening here, you just have to listen to the language of the prophecy itself. He was despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. The AI's job, simply put, was to ask, do these ancient poetic descriptions actually match up with any real patterns in the historical record?
The method it used was basically pattern matching. The easiest way to think about it is like a search engine. The AI took every single descriptive phrase from the prophecy, like despised and rejected, and treated it like a search query. Then it ran that query against its entire database of historical events, just looking for matches.
And wow, what a database to search through. The historical timeline it had covered more than 1,500 years of history. It documented everything from the Roman conquests and the massacres during the Crusades, all the way to nationwide expulsions and pogroms. The key thing here is that this wasn't just about one bad event. It was a long, brutal, recurring pattern.
And this is where it all clicks into place. The AI started finding these direct, incredibly powerful correlations. The phrase from the prophecy, despised and rejected, it mapped that directly onto the historical theme of legalized humiliation. Things like laws forcing people to wear special hats or stars. The phrase, a lamb to the slaughter, correlated with periods of extreme, lethal violence, like the pogroms during the Black Death. And cut off from the land of the living, well, that was a direct match for the historical record of systemic expulsions from entire countries. The connections it was making were just striking.
So after all that, all the data extraction, the side-by-side comparisons, the historical correlations, what did the AI actually conclude? Well, that brings us to its final, source-driven conclusion. Based strictly on the evidence it was given, the AI concluded that a very strong case emerges for the servant being the nation of Israel. And the reason was all about the patterns. The scope of the suffering described in the prophecy, prolonged, systemic, coming from all sides, it found an incredibly powerful match in the recurrent nature of the persecution documented in that long historical timeline. It all came down to the strength of that pattern match.
But let's pull back for a second, because again, the specific conclusion isn't really the main takeaway here. The method is. What we've just walked through is an AI reasoning purely from the sources it was handed. It built an entire argument from the ground up. It connected these different fields, linguistics, theology, history, in a way that was completely transparent. That right there is a powerful model for how to do evidence-based analysis, really in any field.
And that really leaves us with a final big question to think about. If this kind of methodical, source-driven approach can shed light on a 2,700-year-old debate, what other complex questions, what other historical mysteries could a process like this help us understand in a totally new way?